A grieving couple visits an orphanage, hoping to adopt a child and heal their hearts. But when they meet a little girl who looks exactly like their late daughter, the encounter unravels secrets that no one could have imagined. Subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The soft glow of the morning sun broke through the clouds as Mark and Linda Hathaway drove along the quiet countryside road towards St. Mary's Orphanage. The couple, in their late 40s, sat in silence, their minds heavy with the weight of the journey ahead. The soft hum of the car engine was the only sound between them as the countryside rolled by, a landscape of open fields and scattered farmhouses. For the past 2 years, Mark and Linda had been trapped in the shadow of grief, mourning the tragic loss of their only child, Emily. At just 7 years old, Emily's bright laughter and uncontainable energy had been the light of their lives. But that light was extinguished far too soon in a car accident that had left both parents devastated. The emptiness in their home was unbearable, and despite their efforts to move forward, the pain lingered like an unwelcome guest. Linda, a schoolteacher with a gentle heart, had been the first to suggest adoption. "Maybe we can give another child the life Emily deserved," she had said, her voice trembling with both hope and uncertainty. Mark, ever the practical one, had been hesitant at first. But deep down, he knew they needed this, needed something to fill the void Emily had left behind. As the couple approached the orphanage, an old stone building surrounded by tall oak trees, Linda broke the silence. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed ahead. "We've talked about this, Linda. If we can help a child, it's the right thing to do." Linda nodded, though her unease didn't fade. She turned to look at the empty car seat in the back, a painful reminder of what they had lost. St. Mary's Orphanage had a reputation for being a place of warmth and compassion. Its director, Sister Agnes, was a kind-hearted woman in her 60s who had dedicated her life to caring for children in need. The orphanage wasn't large, housing about 30 children at any given time, but it was known for its cozy atmosphere and the sense of family it fostered. As Mark and Linda pulled into the gravel driveway, they were greeted by the sight of children playing in the yard, their laughter ringing through the air. The scene brought a bittersweet smile to Linda's face. "Emily would have loved this," she murmured. Sister Agnes met them at the entrance, her warm smile immediately putting them at ease. Dressed in a simple gray habit, she radiated kindness and a quiet strength. "Mr. and Mrs. Hathaway, welcome," she said, extending a hand. "We're so grateful you've come." "Thank you for having us," Mark replied, shaking her hand. Linda added, "It's a beautiful place." Sister Agnes led them inside, where the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. The orphanage's interior was modest but inviting, with colorful artwork on the walls and bookshelves filled with toys and games. "Why don't I show you around?" Sister Agnes suggested. As they walked through the orphanage, Mark and Linda were introduced to several children. There was Sam, a spirited 6-year-old with a love for soccer, Grace, a shy but creative girl who spent most of her time drawing, and Liam, an outgoing 10-year-old who dreamed of being a firefighter. Each child tugged at their hearts in different ways, but none of them felt like the right fit. Linda, in particular, seemed distracted. She would smile and nod as Sister Agnes introduced the children, but her mind wandered, her thoughts returning to Emily. What if no child ever feels like her, she thought, guilt immediately following the question. As they entered one of the playrooms, Mark noticed a little girl sitting quietly in a corner, her head bent over a piece of paper. She was drawing, her blonde curls falling into her face as she worked. Something about her caught his attention, and he found himself walking toward her. "Hello," Mark said softly, crouching down to the girl's level. The girl looked up, her bright blue eyes meeting his. Mark's breath caught in his throat. The resemblance was uncanny. She looked just like Emily. The same golden hair, the same delicate features, even the same small birthmark on her left hand. "Hi," the girl replied shyly, her voice barely audible. "What's your name?" Mark asked. "Lila," she said, her fingers clutching the crayon she had been using. Sister Agnes, noticing Mark's reaction, stepped closer. "Lila is one of our quieter children," she explained. "She's very creative and loves to draw." Linda, who had been standing nearby, finally noticed the girl. When her eyes fell on Lila, she froze. Her heart raced as she took in the child's face. It was as if Emily was sitting there before her. "Mark," Linda whispered, her voice trembling. She looks just like—" Mark nodded, unable to find the words. Sister Agnes seemed to sense their unease. "Would you like to spend some time with her?" she offered. Mark and Linda exchanged a glance before nodding. "Yes," Mark said. "We'd like that." As the couple spent time with Lila, they couldn't help but notice the small ways she reminded them of Emily. The way she smiled, the way she tilted her head when she was curious. It was all so familiar. Mark quickly formed a connection with Lila, who seemed to warm up to him in a way that surprised even Sister Agnes. "She doesn't usually open up so quickly," she said, watching them interact. Linda, on the other hand, felt a growing unease. The resemblance was too much to be a coincidence, and it stirred emotions she wasn't ready to confront. "What's your favorite thing to draw?" Mark asked Lila as she showed him her sketches. "Families," Lila replied simply, holding up a drawing of 3 figures holding hands. Mark felt a lump in his throat. "That's beautiful," he said. Mark and Linda sat across from Sister Agnes in her modest office, a small room lined with bookshelves and adorned with photographs of smiling children. A crucifix hung above the desk, a testament to the orphanage's foundation of faith and compassion. The room smelled faintly of lavender, calming yet somehow adding weight to the life-altering decision the couple faced. Mark's hands rested on his knees, his knuckles white as he fought to keep his emotions in check. Linda sat stiffly beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the occasional creak of Sister Agnes's wooden chair as she leaned forward. "So," Sister Agnes began gently, folding her hands on the desk, "what do you think of Lila?" Mark was the first to speak, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "She's incredible," he said, a faint smile breaking through his otherwise serious expression. "She's bright, creative, and there's something about her." Linda glanced at Mark, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked away quickly, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions she couldn't yet articulate. Sister Agnes nodded knowingly. "Lila has been with us for nearly 5 years now. She was found in a park not far from here when she was about 2 years old. No one came forward to claim her, and we were never able to locate her family. She's been one of our most reserved children, but she has a kind heart and a talent for art." Mark's eyes softened. "She deserves a home," he said firmly. Linda shifted in her seat, finally finding her voice. "Sister," she began hesitantly, "there's no denying that Lila is a wonderful child, but she looks exactly like our daughter." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she quickly cleared her throat, trying to steady herself. Sister Agnes regarded her thoughtfully. "I noticed the resemblance as well," she admitted. "It's unusual, but perhaps this is fate bringing you together. Sometimes the universe has a way of guiding us to the people we're meant to have in our lives." Mark nodded in agreement, but Linda wasn't convinced. The resemblance didn't feel like fate to her. It felt like a cruel reminder of what they had lost. As they left Sister Agnes's office and walked back toward the orphanage's main hall, Linda's unease grew. Mark was talking animatedly about Lila, already envisioning their life together as a family, but Linda's thoughts were clouded with doubt. What if we're doing this for the wrong reasons? She thought. What if we're trying to replace Emily? She stopped abruptly in the middle of the hallway, causing Mark to turn back in confusion. Linda, are you okay? He asked, concern etched on his face. Linda took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the polished tile floor. Mark, don't you think this is too much of a coincidence? She said finally. It's like the universe is playing some kind of cruel trick on us. She looks exactly like Emily. How can that be? Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice so their conversation wouldn't echo. I don't think it's a trick, Linda, he said earnestly. I think it's a gift. We've been searching for something to fill this void in our lives, and maybe Lila is the answer. Linda shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. But it's not fair to her, she whispered. She's not Emily. She's her own person, and we can't project our grief onto her. It's not right. Mark reached for her hands, holding them tightly. I know she's not Emily, he said, his voice breaking. But Linda, don't you feel it? The connection. The moment I saw her, it felt like she was meant to be part of our family. I can't explain it, but I know it in my heart. Linda looked up at him, searching his face for reassurance. The love and conviction in his eyes were undeniable, but her doubts lingered. Later that evening, as the couple sat in the orphanage's small dining area, Sister Agnes joined them with a tray of tea and cookies. I thought you could use a moment to breathe, she said, setting the tray down on the table. Thank you, Mark said, offering her a grateful smile. Sister Agnes poured the tea and took a seat across from them. Adopting a child is never an easy decision, she began. It's a leap of faith, and it's natural to have doubts. Linda stared into her cup, her hands trembling slightly. It's not just the decision, she admitted. It's the resemblance. She looks so much like our Emily. It's almost unsettling. Sister Agnes nodded, her expression compassionate. I can understand why that might be difficult for you, but perhaps it's not about replacing Emily. Perhaps it's about honoring her memory by giving another child the love and care she would have wanted to share. Mark placed a hand on Linda's shoulder. We've always said Emily had the biggest heart, he said softly. She would have wanted us to help Lila. Linda's eyes filled with tears, and she wiped them away quickly. I just don't want to make a mistake, she whispered. You're not making a mistake, Sister Agnes said gently. Lila has been waiting for a family for years. If you feel even the slightest pull toward her, that's something worth listening to. By the end of the evening, Linda's reservations hadn't entirely disappeared, but she agreed to move forward with the adoption. As she watched Lila playing with the other children, a small smile tugged at her lips. Maybe Mark's right, she thought. Maybe this is fate. The couple signed the necessary paperwork, and Sister Agnes assured them that Lila would be ready to come home with them in a few days. As they left the orphanage that night, Mark felt a renewed sense of hope, while Linda silently prayed that they were making the right choice. 3 days later, the Hathaway home was a flurry of activity. Mark had spent the morning assembling a new bed for Lila in the guest room, while Linda carefully decorated the space to make it feel warm and inviting. She hung pastel curtains, arranged a few stuffed animals on the bed, and placed a small lamp with a butterfly-shaped shade on the nightstand. Despite her lingering unease, Linda wanted Lila to feel welcome. Mark, on the other hand, was practically bursting with excitement. For the first time in 2 years, their house didn't feel empty. The thought of hearing laughter and footsteps echoing through the halls again filled him with a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. By mid-afternoon, the car pulled into the driveway, carrying Lila and a social worker from the orphanage. Mark rushed to open the door, greeting them with a wide smile. Welcome home, Lila, he said warmly, holding out his hand. Lila hesitated for a moment, her small hand clutching the strap of her backpack. She looked up at the house with wide eyes, as if trying to take in every detail. Slowly, she reached for Mark's hand and allowed him to guide her inside. As Lila stepped into the house, her gaze darted around the living room. She seemed fascinated by the family photos on the walls, the soft rug beneath her feet, and the sunlight streaming through the windows. "Do you like it?" Mark asked, crouching down to her level. Lila nodded shyly. "It's pretty," she whispered. Linda, who had been standing near the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. "Lila, would you like to see your room?" she asked gently. Lila nodded again, and Linda led her down the hallway to the guest room. When they reached the door, Linda pushed it open to reveal the carefully decorated space. "This is your room now," Linda said, trying to keep her voice steady. Lila's eyes lit up as she took in the pastel curtains, the neatly made bed, and the toys arranged on the shelves. She walked over to the bed and ran her hand over the soft quilt. "It's beautiful," she said softly, turning to Linda with a small smile. Linda felt a pang in her chest. The smile was so much like Emily's that it took her breath away. As the days went by, Lila began to settle into her new home. She was quiet and reserved, but curious about her surroundings. Mark noticed how quickly she adapted to the routines of the house, almost as if she had been there before. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Lila surprised them by humming a familiar tune. "Is that 'You Are My Sunshine'?" Mark asked, his fork pausing midair. Lila nodded. "It's my favorite song," she said. Mark and Linda exchanged a stunned glance. Emily had loved that song and used to hum it all the time. The coincidence was eerie. While Mark embraced Lila's presence wholeheartedly, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The similarities between Lila and Emily went beyond appearance. It was the little things, the way Lila tilted her head when she was curious, the way she instinctively knew where the extra blankets were stored, or how she always reached for the same cereal Emily used to love. One afternoon, Linda found Lila sitting cross-legged on the floor of the living room, sketching with crayons. Curious, Linda knelt beside her. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "A family," Lila replied, holding up the picture. It showed 3 figures holding hands, a man, a woman, and a little girl. "That's lovely," Linda said, forcing a smile. Lila hesitated, then added quietly, "It's us." Linda's heart clenched. She didn't know whether to feel comforted or overwhelmed by Lila's quick attachment to them. Mark, meanwhile, couldn't have been happier. He spent hours playing board games with Lila, helping her with her homework and showing her how to bake cookies in the kitchen. "She's a miracle," he told Linda one evening as they sat together on the couch. Linda nodded absently, her mind elsewhere. She wanted to believe Mark was right, but the feeling in her gut wouldn't let her rest. Linda's unease continued to grow with each passing day. As much as she wanted to embrace Lila as part of their family, the strange coincidences and uncanny similarities to Emily gnawed at her. It wasn't just Lila's appearance, it was the little things. One evening, Linda walked into the living room and found Lila sitting in the same spot on the couch, where Emily had always curled up with her favorite blanket. Lila had even chosen the same blue throw Emily used to drag around the house. "Lila, how did you know that was Emily's favorite spot?" Linda asked cautiously, sitting down beside her. Lila shrugged, her small fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. "It just feels right," she said simply. Linda forced a smile but couldn't shake the chill that ran down her spine. Unable to ignore her suspicions any longer, Linda decided to dig deeper into Lila's past. One afternoon, while Mark was out grocery shopping with Lila, Linda made an unplanned visit to St. Mary's orphanage. When she arrived, she was greeted by Sister Agnes, who seemed surprised to see her. "Mrs. Hathaway, is everything all right?" Sister Agnes asked, her warm smile fading slightly. Linda hesitated, unsure of how to begin. "I need to ask you some questions about Lila," she said finally. "Of course," Sister Agnes replied, motioning for Linda to follow her into her office. As they sat down, Linda took a deep breath. "Sister, there's something strange about Lila," she began. "She's wonderful, truly, but there are things about her, her habits, the way she behaves, that remind me so much of Emily." Sister Agnes nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I noticed the resemblance when you first came to the orphanage," she admitted. "Do you have any records about where Lila came from?" Linda asked. "Anything that might explain this?" Sister Agnes opened a file cabinet and pulled out a thin folder labeled Lila. She placed it on the desk and opened it, revealing a few documents. "Lila was found abandoned in Rosewood Park when she was about 2 years old," Sister Agnes explained. "A jogger spotted her sitting alone on a bench, holding a small stuffed animal. She was underweight and clearly malnourished, but otherwise unharmed." Linda's heart skipped a beat. Rosewood Park was only a few miles from where Emily's car accident had occurred. "When exactly was she found?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. Sister Agnes flipped through the documents. "It was December 15th, 5 years ago," Linda gasped. That was the same day as the accident. Desperate for more answers, Linda pressed further. "Was there anything unusual about her? Anything that might explain why she was abandoned?" Sister Agnes hesitated before responding. "There was one thing," she said carefully. "When the authorities found her, she was clutching a small blanket with the initials E.H. embroidered on the corner. We assumed it was hers, but if those initials mean something to you—" Linda's head spun. E.H. Emily Hathaway. Tears filled her eyes as a horrifying realization dawned on her. "Sister, I need to know. Did anyone try to claim her? Was there any investigation?" "The police searched for months, but they couldn't find any leads," Sister Agnes said. "We never knew who her parents were." Linda sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Could it be possible that Lila had been with Emily during the accident? Determined to find out the truth, Linda drove straight to the local police station, where she requested records related to Emily's accident. After some convincing, an officer retrieved a box of case files and photographs. As Linda sifted through the files, her hands trembling, she found a report about a witness who had seen 2 children near the scene of the crash. The witness had been unable to confirm what happened to the second child. Then, tucked between the pages, Linda found a photograph of a small stuffed animal, a rabbit with a tattered ear. Her breath caught. It was Emily's favorite toy, the one she had been holding the day of the accident. That night, Linda shared her discovery with Mark, who listened in stunned silence as she explained everything. "Mark, Lila was there," Linda said, tears streaming down her face. "She must have been in the car with Emily when it happened. For some reason, she survived and was left behind at the park." Mark looked at her, his face pale. "Are you saying Lila is Emily's sister?" "Not just her sister," Linda whispered, "her twin." Later that night, Mark and Linda sat in the living room, the dim light casting long shadows across the walls. They had barely spoken since Linda shared her discovery. Mark stared at the photograph of the stuffed rabbit, his mind swirling with questions. "We have to tell her," Linda said finally, her voice trembling. "She deserves to know the truth." Mark looked at her, his jaw tight. "How do we even begin to explain this to her? She's just starting to settle in." "She's not just any child, Mark," Linda said, her voice firm. She's Emily's twin. We can't keep this from her. It's not fair." Before they could discuss it further, they heard the sound of small footsteps approaching. They turned to see Lila standing in the doorway, clutching the blue blanket she had taken a liking to. "Why are you crying?" Lila asked softly, her wide blue eyes filled with concern. Linda wiped her tears quickly and forced a smile. "Come here, sweetheart," she said, motioning for Lila to join them on the couch. Lila hesitated for a moment before climbing up beside Linda. She glanced at the photograph in Mark's hand. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the stuffed rabbit. Mark and Linda exchanged a glance, and Linda took a deep breath. "Lila, we need to talk to you about something very important," she said gently. Linda held Lila's small hand in hers, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "Do you remember anything about your life before the orphanage?" she asked softly. Lila furrowed her brow, thinking hard. "Not really," she said. "I just remember being at the park. A lady found me and gave me food, and then I went to the orphanage." Linda nodded, her heart aching for the little girl's fragmented memories. "Do you know why you were at the park?" Lila shook her head. "No, I don't remember." Mark leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Lila, we think you were there because of an accident. A car accident." Lila's eyes widened and she looked between them, confused. "What do you mean?" Linda took the photograph from Mark and showed it to Lila. "Do you recognize this?" Lila's face lit up. "That's Bunny," she exclaimed. Linda's heart clenched. "That was Emily's bunny," she said. "Emily, she was our daughter." Lila stared at the photograph, her expression slowly shifting from excitement to realization. "Emily," she whispered. "Was she my sister?" "Yes," Linda said, tears streaming down her face. "Not just your sister, Lila, your twin." Lila sat in stunned silence, her small hands clutching the photograph. "I had a sister," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded. "You were both in the car that day. We didn't know you existed, Lila. We didn't know you were Emily's twin because the hospital, they never told us there were two of you. We think there was a mix-up and you were separated from us when you were born." Lila's lip quivered and her eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't anyone come for me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Linda pulled her into a tight hug, her tears falling freely. "Oh, sweetheart, if we had known, you would have been with us all along. We would have come for you the moment you were born. You belong with us. You always have." Mark wrapped his arms around them both, his own tears falling. "You're part of our family, Lila," he said. "We love you so much." The next few days were emotional for the family. Lila had many questions about Emily, what she was like, what she loved to do, and how she had lived her life. Mark and Linda answered each question with care, sharing stories that brought both laughter and tears. To help Lila feel closer to her sister, Linda brought out a box of Emily's belongings that she had kept in storage. Among the items were photos, drawings, and a few favorite toys. Lila was particularly drawn to a picture of Emily holding the same stuffed rabbit she had clutched in the park years ago. "She looks like me," Lila said softly, tracing Emily's face with her finger. "She does," Mark said with a smile. "Because you're twins. You'll always share that special bond." One afternoon, Mark and Linda took Lila to visit Emily's grave for the first time. Lila held a bouquet of daisies in her hands as they walked through the quiet cemetery. When they reached the headstone, Lila knelt down and placed the flowers gently at its base. "Hi, Emily," she said softly. "I'm your sister, Lila. I wish I could have met you, but I'll take care of Mom and Dad for you. I promise." Mark and Linda stood behind her, their hearts swelling with love and pride. In the weeks that followed, the Hathaway family began to heal in ways they never thought possible. Lila brought a new light into their lives, and through her they felt closer to Emily than ever before. Linda's initial doubts were replaced with a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that Lila wasn't a replacement for Emily. She was a reminder of the love they had shared and a new chapter in their family's story. As for Lila, she flourished in her new home. She continued to draw pictures of her family, always including Emily as an angel watching over them. One evening, as they sat together watching a movie, Lila snuggled between Mark and Linda on the couch. "I'm happy I found you," she said, her voice sleepy but sincere. "We're happy you found us too," Linda replied, kissing the top of her head. And for the first time in years, their home felt whole again. This heartwarming story reminds us of the unbreakable bonds of family and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Sometimes life takes us on unexpected journeys, but fate has a way of bringing us exactly where we're meant to be. For the Hathaways, the discovery of Lila wasn't just a chance to rebuild their family. It was a miracle that reconnected them to the love they thought they had lost forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it. Subscribe to Stories Unfolded for more incredible tales of resilience, family, and life's unexpected twists. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you.